Johannes Weidenmueller,
Yes.
thank you very much for accepting my interview request.
You're welcome.
And welcome to this beautiful space with an orange background.
Right, yes.
Well, you are a German jazz bass player. You play the double bass and the electric bass. You are an arranger, a composer, an educator, and a writer, and a psychologist.
That's correct, yes, indeed.
So you are born in Heidelberg in Germany in 1966. Sorry that I have to say that.
It doesn't bother me.
You studied at the Hochschule für Musik in Cologne, in Köln, and then moved to New York in 1991.
Correct.
And there you studied at the New School University in New York, and the teachers were giants such as Dave Holland, Cecil McBee, Ron Carter, and Buster Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Please explain how you discovered that the 4 strings on the bass would become a profession for you.
Well, it wasn't that hard. I grew up in a family of musicians. My mom is a harpsichord player. My dad still played the bassoon. And in the extended family, one of my uncles, second removed, was a violinist of the Berlin Philharmonic at the time. So everybody played an instrument in the family, and so it was suggested to me early on to play an instrument, and I was supported in that. So I played the cello when I was 6. So that's had 4 strings, and functions somewhat in a similar role as the bass does in the basso continuo. So I just continued that sort of role when I switched to the double bass and electric bass when I was about 15 or so. So that's how that all started.
Yeah. What made you to move to New York?
I was studying at the Hochschule in Cologne, and I had I think my cousin, who's also a German bass player, who's a great bass player by the way, Henning Sieverts, who lives in Munich and plays. He was there at the time, and I had some other musician friends who spent a semester at the New School actually, and that got me really excited. And just knowing the tradition and history of jazz and how much of it was and still is concentrated in New York made me want to spend a semester there, and I applied at the New School and went there for a semester and then got stuck there, as many people do.
Okay. Can you please tell me, maybe short, what you learned at the Hochschule für Musik in Cologne the most?
What did I learn the most there? You know, the most influential thing, or the most important thing to me was that I just found some musicians there that we ended up playing a lot. We played it every other day at somebody's house or at the Hochschule, played sessions, learned tunes. Just musicians who were really excited about the language of jazz and playing it and needing to play it. And I think that was the most important thing. Of course, I learned bass technique, I learned all the other things that you learn, but just that community of musicians there was the most important thing, I think.
Okay. And how was the life and study atmosphere for you at the New School University in New York?
I was super exciting. It's changed, at least from my perspective, it's changed a little bit because it seems like it's harder, there's less gigs in New York, everything's gotten more expensive. And when I moved, apartments were cheap. I was living in the East Village for, I think, $500 for a room or something. And the Village Gate was there was so many clubs that don't exist today anymore. And so everybody played all the time. We had there was a house in Brooklyn on Sackett Street that, who lived there? I think Jorge Rossi was there for a time. Anyway, we played every night in the basement with Brad Mehldau, with Josh Redman, with Chris Reed, with all these people who now play big on the scene. So just that atmosphere in New York, everybody wanting to play all the time, concerts, gigs everywhere, was heaven, was incredibly exciting at that time, for sure.
And what did you learn there the most, what you still use today?
At the New School, well, I think it's just the process of maybe it was not so much what I learned, but it was being reaffirmed and supported in the process of exploration and curiosity that is fundamental to jazz, of people wanting to connect around a shared interest of exploring the music, playing, communicating, being excited in it, the knowledge that it's an alive art form that changes all the time, that gives everybody an equal voice, and sort of that, I think, are the pillars of what I learn and still am interested in terms of that music, and that's what was present at the New School.
Yeah, did you have some special mentors there, some special teachers that made you something, that gave you something special?
You know what, all the teachers there were great, and everybody obviously contributed something different. I mean, Dave Holland is such an amazing bass player and has such a clear concept on teaching and practicing, so I got a lot, and exploring the rhythmic language, I got a lot from him. But there were so many other teachers that have had, there'd be too many to talk about them all, but each of them, and that's the spirit of New York, each of them have something and had something to offer that was unique and really valuable. Okay.
Well, your colleague, artist Sting, he wrote a very well-known song, An Englishman in New York. And he describes his journey living as an Englishman in New York. How was your start in New York, living as a German man in New York? Could you also maybe write a song like Sting?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the things in New York that maybe makes it different from any other place in the world is that I think I had somebody visit. My brother-in-law came to visit with his family. He's Italian, the other day, last year, and he said in New York, "It's so funny. I'm here for 2 days, and I already feel like I belong here. There's something about New York that is so welcoming because there's so many different ethnicities, races. There's so much diversity that being German sort of fell away a little bit. It just felt like moving into the space of New York and being a New Yorker and feeling like you belong there. So it didn't feel strange or out of place to me. And there was also something about needing to be away from Germany for a little while, because at least for my generation, I don't know if it's the case anymore, there was still the collective shadow hanging over us, and identifying and really being proud to be German was something that didn't quite feel right, so getting away from that for a little while was also, I think, helpful.
Because there are also many cliches people think about German people, especially in the US. I think the Germans build the best cars, they are the best friends, they make the best sausages, they make for sure the best bread, they have a charming accent, and they work very efficiently and so on. Did you also have to face something like that?
I guess so, although I'm not really aware of too many stereotypes coming my way. Maybe there was something about responsibility and punctuality that people did and maybe do value about me, that they have pointed out to me over the course of the years, that there's something that's also good for being a bass player, where you are responsible for the harmonic, melodic, rhythmic essence of the band, in a sense, that it's nice to have somebody who's responsible, who likes doing that, and maybe that's part of the German heritage, I don't know.
So you never felt like an alien in New York?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, as a bass player, you are mastering the dark and low sound universe, and you are also mastering always the band's basic sound somehow.
Uh-huh.
What do you need to be a good bass player in a band? Which skills do you need? How does bass work in a band work?
Well, I think, and there's other examples, not one model fits all, but I think you have, it's a sort of personality trait. You have to want to be you have to love the bass and love the function of the bass. You have to want to support in a certain sense, right? You have to love to take some responsibility for the band. If you always want to shine and be in the spotlight, there's bass players who do that well, but they don't quite always function as bass players. It's a different role. So I think there's some traits of personality, like the cello too, right? It's not an instrument that always shines and is in the front, but oftentimes the role is as a supportive function. And so you have to like that. If you don't like that at all, then you're probably not cut out to be a bass player. But there's other tools. You have to master harmony and rhythm and have a super solid time and other things that I could go into. But I think more general, it's that love for that space of responsibility, taking care, and having power. There's tremendous power. If I play a different bass note to a chord, the chord becomes something else. So by changing the root, I can make it something completely different. So there's also some power and responsibility in that as well.
And is there a difference being a bass player in New York or in Germany and Cologne maybe?
I think there's a difference in being a musician. I don't want to sound judgmental, but just the level in New York, because of the many musicians who are there and the level that there's a higher level, maybe you're challenged more, and there's more diversity. There's different types of music. There's everything there. So it's a difference. Sure, it's maybe more exciting and more challenging.
Okay. Well, your sound is made by your touch through your fingers, right. How you touch the strings, and also, of course, the body of the bass is important. Even the sound capacity of the wood tree in the corpus. And the choice of your amplifier. Please explain how you build your sound with your instrument.
It's a good question. I mean, I think all of us musicians, every musician goes through a phase of experimenting with different instruments, trying different strings, trying different amplifiers to find the sound that resonates most with each one of them. But as travel is concerned these days, when I tour, which is where I play most of my music, I don't get to travel with my bass. That stopped 15 years ago, so I play whatever bass, whatever strings, whatever amplifier people have. And so my sound has become, I've had to work on my sound. I think all the great bass players can do that, or great musicians, is that your sound travels with you and not with you, is not as dependent on the instrument. So it's really how you touch an instrument, what you listen to the instrument, what does it need, if it's too tight, if it's too bright, too dark, you adjust your thing so that you get the sound that you get. And most great musicians can do that in certain parameters, obviously.
What kind of amplifier do you use?
You know what? What do I have? I have an Eden, I think, and I have a Gallion Kruger at home. But in New York, all the clubs have amplifiers. And on the road, so I haven't used my amp in, I don't know, it's 3 years or something, so I have to think what I use. I don't travel with my gear, so.
Yeah, but when you travel, you can't always keep your bass with you. I read that you sometimes use basses on the place.
Right.
Is this always working for you?
Well, again, within certain parameters. Sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, and sometimes it's good, but I try to... The thing is that you can't get attached. If you're very controlling and you need a certain thing every night because that's what you're used to, a certain sound, a certain feel of the bass, then you're going to be in trouble. But if you're willing to work with the circumstances and know that maybe you get a bass where the string height is very high and you just can't play fast, then you can't play fast and you have to readjust. There's a certain flexibility that is inherent in that kind of situation. So it's not a good situation for somebody who's very controlled and tight and needs a certain thing every night.
Well, life in New York is very expensive. The gigs are not always paid well. The life costs, the rents, even school fares are extremely high. Why do people still move there? What is the magic for you to be a citizen in New York?
It's a good question, and I think it'd be worthwhile asking a 21-year-old, 25-year-old musician in New York right now, because my perspective has changed a little since I've moved there, and it's true that it's gotten prohibitively expensive. When I moved there first, there were many places for rent and to play in that were cheap, that supported artists, and now it's much harder to do that as an artist in New York. And so it's a good question. What is the lure of New York? Do you really have to be in New York? And I don't know if I can positively answer that question. I think there's still a certain thing in New York, so many musicians, that is really great and beneficial to experience, but I don't know if I would recommend to a young musician to say you have to be in New York anymore. I think there's many more musicians around the world that have spent some time in New York. There's other places that are exciting, so it's lost a little bit of that super specialness. But I've been there almost 30 years, 28 years, and I have a family, I have an established circle of friends, I have community, I have gigs, I have my practice there. So for me, it's a good life, because that's what I know, that's what I built. Okay.
Well, how often do you change the bass strings, and why?
Not that often. I don't know, every 3 years. Why? Because they start to sound dull a little bit. But there's a famous Motown bass player called James Jamerson. He was the bass player in all those incredible Motown recordings. He never changed the strings, ever. So there was a period when I was going to the luthier a lot. The bass doesn't quite sound right. Can you fix this? Can you change this? And that's no longer the case. I'm fine. The bass sounds like this. Okay, tomorrow I know it'll sound like this. It'll be fine. And in 2 years, if they need it, I'll change the strings again.
So they never collapse like someone who plays guitar experiences a lot that strings break?
No, bass strings rarely break. They're too thick.
They stay forever with you.
Right.
More or less.
Right.
Okay. Well, you are a very busy musician with many projects, many artists you collaborate with, you record many albums with all kinds of artists, so you have to be extremely flexible in your way. How do you do that? And how do you learn all that material you need to play? Is there a secret maybe how to learn the best way?
That's a really good question. Well, I think, first of all, there has to be a fundamental openness and curiosity about lots of different types of music. If you're not interested in lots of different types of music, then that's not going to help you. And then I think early on, it was a process of faking my way through it as good enough so that I got the gig. So somebody would call me up. I remember Ray Barretto, I used to play with him early on. I was in New York maybe 3 or 4 years, and he offered me the gig in his Latin jazz band, and he said, "You can play Latin jazz, right?" And I said, "Sure." I hadn't played really Latin jazz, so I took 6 weeks and really checked it out, and I looked at his book, and then for the first couple of gigs, I faked my way through it well enough to keep the gig, and then I learned on the gig. So that's what you do. That's what the cats back then did. Do it well enough so that you learn on the bandstand. And that's basically, I got the gig with Hank Jones after I had been in New York for 6 months. Again, I was way too green for the gig, but I did it well enough to keep it and then learn on the bandstand. So that's the best way to learn. And thankfully, at least when I was around New York, there were still lots of opportunities to do that with older, seasoned musicians.
So there's no secret?
I guess there's a secret if you want to talk about learning tunes quickly, learning styles quickly. There's maybe a secret in terms of memorization or zooming out. I tell my students that, we make sense of the world by lots of zooming out, like grouping information into larger groupings so that we can see something in a larger context. So I do that. You do that with tunes. Zoom in, zoom. What's the form? Can I learn the form? What are the important stylistic elements? What's important so that you don't get stuck in the little details, but you get a broad overview sense of what something is so you can learn it quickly. Maybe that's one of the secrets. Really zoom in and what does the music need? What makes it special or particular? What are the elements and can I concentrate on those? And then the little things I learn later on the bandstand. If that makes any sense.
So like this you manage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, being a bass player, you always have a very special relationship with the drummer of the band.
That is correct.
And in your case, I want to mention Ari Hoenig.
Yeah.
You play with him since a long time, especially in the Kenny Werner Trio.
Right.
And you also wrote a book with him.
Uh-huh.
Can you please first explain the relationship bass and drums, and then especially your way to be with Ari Hoenig?
Right. I mean, bass and drums form the core of the rhythm section, and that's a good question. Let's see if I can put it into words. What's the relationship? I mean, certainly time-wise, right? If you talk swing, the walking bass notes are lined up with the cymbal. If you talk other styles of music, maybe the bass is more hooked up with the bass drum. But there has to be a relationship between bass and drums where the basic sense of time lines up and is felt in a similar way. And throughout history of jazz, the great bands always had great rhythm sections. You hear Ron Carter and Tony Williams, or all the other ones. And rhythm section obviously includes piano too at times. But speaking about the relationship with bass and drums, yeah, there has to be a chemistry, a felt sense of a shared felt sense of time that is because I play with certain drummers, or certain drummers play with me for sure, where it's fun, but we also realize both that something is not quite felt the same way, and it doesn't feel totally natural, and it's a little bit more work. And that's not an intellectual thing necessarily, but it's like where do I feel the beat? Is that I think Vijay Iyer just wrote an article on that, whether time and micro-timing is an intellectual thing or whether it's a somatic thing. And I think his point was, and I haven't read the article, it's more of a somatic felt sense. And that's something maybe that's more inherent and can't be explained. And so there are two people meet and they have the same felt sense, and then they start hooking up.
And what do you want to tell me about your relationship with Ari?
With Ari. Oh, Ari, yeah. Let me talk about Ari, because I love Ari. We met early on, I think, I don't know, maybe it was 95 in New York, or 94, and started playing jam sessions, and instantly there was a nice that shared sense or hookup. And then we were both interested in the same thing. We were both interested in exploring what we can do with subdivisions, groupings, polyrhythms, over a form. How can we stretch the time over form? How can we build tension and release with those devices, metric modulation, superimposition? And so we started working on that in the context of different people that we were playing with. And then I had played with Kenny Werner at a workshop in Sandpoint, Idaho in 93 or something. And we had hooked up, and then separately Ari had played with Kenny Werner with someone else, and then Kenny asked Ari, who do you want to play with? And he said, oh, let's call Johannes, I love playing with him. And so then we played at Kenny's house, and it felt like, again, the same vibe, sort of like, that could be cool. And we've been together for almost 20 years now.
No secrets?
No secrets, no.
Okay. What is, in general, your idea about time and timing?
My idea about time. Well, time could have lots of different meanings, but in the context of musical time, maybe, what's my idea about time? I think it's just, to start off with, it's something that is extremely important. It's a fundamental aspect of music. And I'm interested, and always have been interested, in how to play it, talk about it, experience it, play with it, stretch it, contract it as one element of the music. And there's people who approach, that's where I'm coming from, or where I came from more, in terms of my interest, and there's people that come more from the harmonic aspect, right? Where time is not so important, but it's all about the colors and harmony. But I came a little more from the time aspect of things.
How do you stretch time?
Well, you can stretch time a lot of different ways. You can, if you subdivide a beat in eighth notes, and then you play every third eighth note, that gives you dotted quarter notes. That is a pulse that is longer, that is stretched than the original pulse. And if you stretch that over the form, it gives you a sense of the time being elongated or stretched. And contracted, you make it faster grouping. So it's that sense. You superimpose a different feel that's either slower, i.e. stretched, or faster, i.e. contracted over a basic pulse.
Well, in 2005 you wrote a book with Ari Hoenig about metric modulation. A book in 2 parts, volume 1 and volume 2. And it's about contracting and expanding time within form, and it's for learning advanced rhythm, polyrhythm, and metric and harmonic superimposition.
Right.
And it looks at rhythm and enables for all instruments. Explain how you got the idea to write this book, and explain the technique you offer. The
idea, I think I started talking about it, was just Ari and me got together, and maybe he played something he was working on, and I said, oh, that's cool, or the other way around. We had this shared interest of that's groupings of 3. How would that sound over eighth notes and groupings of 3 over this and this form? Or, well, that's 3. What about if we do 5? What would 5 feel like? And how many bars do we do it over? And so once you open the box, the wormhole, if you will, then there's endless possibilities. So we just decided, well, I think maybe somebody approached us from Melby, the publisher, to do it, or we just said, well, we're working on this anyway, let's write some stuff down, and then it developed into, well, we got some stuff, why don't we put it in a book format? And so it's just a byproduct of working on that stuff and playing it on gigs with Kenny Werner and exploring it, and Kenny was also part of it a little bit on certain gigs. We just worked on it on the sound check, so that was the genesis of that book. And then in terms of what we offer exactly that. We offer a way, first of all, to really solidify your internal timekeeper, meaning that whether you play any of that stuff or not, just to be able to hear and feel all these different layers of rhythm going on will make you incredibly solid in your time feel, and then you can choose to create or not create ideas with those tools.
Well, it's also about polyrhythms.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, polyrhythms is just two rhythms going. 3 over 4 is a polyrhythm. So if you're in 4/4 or 3/4, that's 4/4 time, and you have 4 quarter notes, and you want to place 3 equal beats over those 4. That's your polyrhythm. So you have 3 in 1 bar and 4 in 1 bar. So divide the quarter notes into 16th notes, and then into triplets, and you play every 4th one of those, and you get 3 beats over 4. That's 3 or 4. That's basically a polyrhythm.
Okay. So you are here in Groningen at the Prince Claus Conservatorium teaching this week. It's part of the program New York Comes to Groningen.
Right.
What do you teach here, and who do you teach?
Well, the Groningen has this concept that they bring in 15 different faculty members from New York to Groningen to each teach 1 week in the semester. So I come here twice a year for 1 week, and all the faculty members run the ensembles. So I think I have 4 master's ensembles and 8 ensembles during the week, which I teach, and then I have all the bass students. So I think I maybe had 7 individual lessons, and then I do a vocal master class and a general master class for everybody. And I teach whatever is needed. I see what the ensembles need and tune into those needs and provide them hopefully with the information and experience for the holes that are lacking in their playing or in their thinking or whatever it might be.
So you teach all kind of students, like singers, piano players, bass players,
Absolutely, yeah.
everyone,
Everyone.
in fact. Do you also teach how to improvise?
Of course.
How do you do that?
Well, one is there's different aspects to improvisation, obviously, and people who come here have had some basic training, at least in the language. If you're talking about improvisation, you're talking about improvising using a certain medium or container or language to improvise in, right? And that's the language here of changes, of melody, of harmony, of rhythm. And so part of it is facilitating more ease with the language so that then the thinking about melody, harmony, rhythm goes away a little bit, or is to the side, so then they can really focus on improvisation. So part of it is setting the stage or the groundwork for them to be able to be improvised, which is mastery of what are the elements are. And then the other thing is to be able to help them access their creativity and taking chances and getting lost and letting themselves be uncomfortable a little bit to see if they can come up with some more original stuff.
Yeah, and coming back to the rhythm, how do people learn different rhythms? I know that many people struggle because they are counting all the time, so
Right.
they made it a mathematical puzzle somehow.
Right.
How is your approach on learning rhythm?
Well, I think it's the approach to learning in general, but maybe even more particular to rhythm, because as I said, rhythm ultimately is a felt sense. So if you have no felt sense of what the end of 4 feels like, then you might have a mathematical or cognitive understanding of what it is, but you still can't really apply it because you don't know what it feels like. So there has to be a way, or there is a way, what I'm trying to encourage is to really enable them to get a physical somatic experience of what it feels like in their body. They have to be connected in their body, clapping, singing, walking, tapping, so that eventually simple things become, I talk a lot about implicit memory, procedural memory. That's the memory we use when we walk, when we ride our bikes, when we eat, all the things that are going on subconsciously that we do without having to think about them. We can have a conversation while we walk, right? We don't have to think about how we walk. We don't have to pay attention to that. So eventually, we want all those musical elements, whether it's rhythm, whether it's simple polyrhythms, whether it's changes, harmonies, to be so much an intrinsic, implicit memory, automatic, where just our muscles do the work, our fingers go here, so that we can then actually pay attention to what's really important, listening, reacting, and so that we're not, imagine having to walk, if you had to think about how to walk all the time, and then having to have a conversation, or paying attention to the environment would be really difficult. So that's the process of getting them to feel the rhythm, not only cognitively understand it.
Well, there's so much music existing on this planet.
That is true.
It seems to be a major language somehow that connects all people very easy.
Uh-huh.
What do you think is music, and where does it come from?
Wow, you're asking the big questions here. I don't know how to answer that. Oh, God. Well, there's certainly something about music that is non-conceptual, right? That allows us to get out of the box of conceptual. When we talk, language is very conceptual, and it locks us into a certain way of understanding. Seeing can be at least very conceptual. You look at a table, it is a table. It is nothing else. It is a table, meaning that it comes with the meaning and definition of table. It comes with all your associations of table. Things placed on them, sitting at them, eating at them, functionality, right? It's not just non-conceptual, it's not just abstract. So immediately the definition narrows everything in, and therefore it doesn't allow for so much other stuff, creativity, freedom to flow in. I think music, one of the things that's attractive about it is that it's non-conceptual, and therefore it's a little more limitless or immediate, or what are the other things that you could, it somehow can bypass the ego a little bit, right? And so I think that's what's attractive to a lot of people, and obviously it stimulates emotions, and it certainly also has a transcendent element for me, you know.
Okay. Well, you are and you were a member of the Hank Jones Trio. You mentioned already also the Ray Barretto's New World Spirit. Then the John Abercrombie Quartet, the Joe Lovano Trio. And you were a sideman of many. And I mentioned just Eddie Henderson, Dewey Redman, Kenny Wheeler, George Benson, Wynton Marsalis, Joshua Redman, Brad Mehldau, John Scofield, Dr. John, and Madeleine Peyroux. You played with flamenco artists and Indian ensembles, so you have experience to play with tabla, drums, and you compose yourself also. What do you need to have in a proper composition? How do you compose, and do you follow maybe a ritual to get in the right atmosphere? How important are also titles?
I don't need a ritual. I don't have a set blueprint for compositions. I think there's lots of different ways I approach compositions. It depends on what or who I write for, and sometimes I just feel I want to, because really that's what I like. I want to write vehicles for improvisation, and so I write tunes that lend themselves, that have information enough but are not too constricting, will allow people just then to express themselves. I like giving people the freedom to play who they are, and so I don't really write many extended, long, involved things. There's others that do that better than I do. And so I might approach compositionally things writing from a piano, writing from a drum, maybe coming up with a groove first. So I think we need to stretch ourselves in terms of the blueprint we come from in order to write. So try to write from a different place to come up with a different composition. And titles, I am not a person who first has a title and writes a tune based on the information in the title. I usually come up with titles after the fact, so not that important.
Okay, well, you play a lot with Kenny Werner. You are part of the Kenny Werner Trio. You recorded at least 5 albums. Can you tell me what the magic is for you to play with Kenny Werner? And what do you experience? What do you learn from him, maybe?
I've learned so much from him over the years. I mean, he's a master on the instrument. He is, at least harmonically for sure, melodically, but harmonically, his information, that's what I learned. I think one of the things I learned the most is just about harmony, because he's such a master harmonically. And so I'm still growing, still learning from him. In turn, I think he always mentions that he learns from us rhythmically. So one of the magic is that we learn from each other. We still are growing individually, and then give that, or the other person benefits from that. Other than that, there's just it's sometimes hard to put a finger on it. There is just something that happens that sometimes defies explanation, that is just that felt sense of connection or knowing or speaking the same language that has carried us through in terms of being a working trio, and it's felt great.
How did you get started together?
I think, like I said before, I had played with Ari in a different context, and then I had played with Kenny at that workshop in Sandpoint, Idaho, where I was a student and he was the faculty, and we ended up playing a lot. And then we connected at a jam session at his house, and sometime in '95 or so, and it instantly felt like a good fit. And then he had some gigs, and we went to Europe and started playing, and that's all there was to it, actually.
Well, you travel really a lot. What are you doing during your travels? I mean, you are also sitting in planes for many hours. What's happening then? What for do you use all this time?
What's all this time?
This
yes.
sitting time, especially.
Well, sometimes Sometimes you have a 4 a.m. wake-up call with a 3-hour drive to the airport, 7 o'clock check-in, 9 o'clock flight, 2 flights. You get to the next airport at 3 p.m. You take a 2-hour drive. You get to the sound check at 5 p.m. You have dinner. You play 2 sets from 8 to 11:30, and then you have a 6 o'clock wake-up call the next morning. So time, you try to sleep on planes maybe, and relax and rest. If not, I read. I try to listen to music. But oftentimes it's also catching up on some sleep.
Yeah. And how do you in general listen to music? To other music than the music you have to play or you're around?
How do I listen to it? Or?
Yeah. Do you listen on your phone, or do you have a good stereo installation at home?
Oh no, I don't have a good stereo installation at home. No, unfortunately, I'd love to have a room, a man cave with a nice sound system and a turntable and vinyl, but I don't have that luxury, so no, I do listen to it on the phone.
So it's the phone?
Yeah.
Wow. And do you like it?
If I'm in a plane and I have good headphones, sure. There's noise going on. Yes, if I had my choice at home, like I said, I would probably have a different setup. But
okay. And can you tell me which concert you visited the last time, just for enjoying?
That's a really good question. Wow. I'd have to think back. What did I... Oh, I just saw the New York Philharmonic, and my mother was in town, and when my mother and my wife was out of town, we went to see the New York Philharmonic and played Beethoven. That was great.
Beethoven?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me what beauty is for you? What is beautiful for you?
What is beautiful? That's a good question. It's in the eye of the beholder, right? So, I think lots of things are beautiful. It's just a way of how you pay attention to them, right? A sunrise in New York can be really beautiful. A piece of music can be really beautiful. A smile from my son waking up in the morning can be really beautiful. A smile from a stranger on the train can be really beautiful. So I think it's more paying attention to the moments in life that are there as opposed to some big thing, and tuning into those moments that are really touching. And there's so many others in my private psychotherapy practice. There's lots of beautiful moments that are touching, so I feel like I experience them quite a bit.
And do you ever experience also silence?
Sure.
And how important is silence for you?
Silence is incredible. It has become more and more important. Silence is, I have a long-standing meditation practice, and so I'm more able to, in the practice, but outside of it, to access the space of awareness, which is inherently silent, and that's a very, very important space.
Okay. Well, what do all the musicians you play with have in common?
What do all the musicians I play with have in common? I think everybody has a true love for the music. I think everybody feels like, at least at some point, and more or less so, they're on this earth to play music. They're here. Everybody has a sense of exploration, of curiosity, of wanting to grow, of wanting to being excited about the music. Most musicians that I play with, that I choose to play with, have somewhere the intention that they want to communicate. as on stage as well as with the audience. I don't do that much anymore, where there's musicians who just are in their own heads and play their thing and want to present something. That's not as interesting to me anymore. So I think all the musicians that I do play with, there's a shared intentionality around communicating and around creating something together, listening to each other, responding, reacting.
Okay. Well, do you understand yourself as a German jazz artist living and working in the US or not?
Do I understand myself as a German jazz? No, I don't. But I don't really understand myself as a US artist. I don't really know what that means. And I'm really, that attachment to an identity that is either German or American has sort of fallen away a little bit. So I wouldn't really know how to answer that question, other than it doesn't feel like one or the other. I'm sure there's aspects to me that are more German and aspects to me that are more American, but like constructing an identity around that feels solid is just not where I'm at. So it's hard to answer that.
So you're more a world citizen?
But that sounds sort of like, it sounds a little put on. I'm a citizen of the world, I'm bigger than the individual. I don't know if that's even true, but it's just like, I don't connect with particularly feeling German or particularly feeling American either.
Okay. Well, as a psychologist, you are a trauma therapist. You focus, next to special treatments like Gestalt therapy and mindfulness, on awareness, on change, on growth, and on healing.
Right.
Reading this information, I got the idea you might be even a spiritual person. Is this true?
That is true, yeah.
And if so, how does spirituality colors your work and life as a professional human being?
That's another big question. Well, in the work as a psychotherapist, there's a couple different spaces you can come from. One being, there's something lacking in the other person, i.e. the patient or client, and you need to provide them with something that they don't have. Or the fundamental feeling is there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. So you have everything that you need. The only problem is that there's things obstructing, getting in the way of, blocking your access to those. So that is a very different way of working, first of all, but more fundamentally is a very different way of perceiving or understanding the human being that's across from you. And that comes from a more, if you will, deeper spiritual place, that there's a sense that it's all okay, it's good, it's okay. Just we need to remove the misconceptions, the misunderstandings.
And what is your experience in treating and healing trauma?
Oh, profound, and very grateful for it, because I've been able to, with my training in these different modalities that I use, been able to be part of, facilitate, be a witness to people coming from profound trauma and real pain into a space of awakening and feeling whole and discovering themselves again and living a life that's much more full. So to be able to somehow facilitate that or be in service to that is really profoundly gratifying.
What is the importance of failure and making mistakes in life, especially in artists' business and students' life?
Good question. I think, again, the two paradigms, if you have failure and success as your two paradigms on the one side, then you're always caught in the middle. You're trying to achieve perfection, and on the other side is failure. If those two don't really exist in the sense that there is no perfection, and all you can really do is fail well, or fail really well, then there's no pressure. Then you don't approach. There's a wonderful, that everybody who's going to watch this probably knows, there's a quote or a story by Herbie Hancock about playing with Miles, and I'm just paraphrasing here. There was one night on stage where Herbie calmed something, a chord, and he knew the instant he calmed it, it was terrible, it was wrong, ouch, and the talking about failure, wrong, mistake. And an instant later, Miles played a note that made that chord perfectly right again. And so the lesson for Herbie in that, in general, playing with Miles, was that you have a choice. You can either relate to events, musical events, or this applies to events in life too, as a mistake. When you relate to them as a mistake, the options close, you're locked in, you're boxed in, that's a failure then, and there's your failure. Or you can relate to them as events. If it's just an event, it's another sound, Herbie played another sound, then your choices or options are open, and you can relate to them in many different ways. You're open to making something with them, out of them, but you're not tied to the story of what something is, a mistake or a success. And in that sense, I don't have much attachment to needing to succeed anymore, if whatever that means. You know?
Okay, well, can you tell me how you play solos, bass solos? Is there a way to improvise, especially for you, to play a solo? Is there construction maybe helping you or not? How do you do that?
I think it depends. That's a question that can only be answered with depends. It depends on the situation, depends on the tune, depends on, sometimes I might go in with something that is a little premeditated of I want to try something, or I heard something in the chorus before. Sometimes there's nothing, I just go with the first thing I hear. Probably I try to be in the space of listening more so than anything premeditated. But sometimes it's fun to play with ideas that you have in your head and see what you can do with that too. So it's probably a mix of the two. It's the nice mix of the intellectual, which is so sparkly and interesting, and the emptiness of space, or the pure listening where creativity flows. So just mixing up those two and finding a good balance.
Yeah. Well, when you play, like for example, you have a performance with a band, and you're really in there. Where are you then? Are you time traveling maybe somehow? Are you traveling to other places, or are you always in there, in the moment where everything is happening?
I don't think hopefully, I don't try and travel to other places. No, ideally, I'm in the moment. I'm fully present to what's happening. I'm responding to what's happening. I'm not stuck in any narrative or mental story about something, and I'm in the space of being fully present.
Okay. Well, Kenny Werner wrote a guide to distill the emotional, spiritual and psychological aspects of an artist's life. And it's helping to unlock talent and potential. And it's called Effortless Mastery. It's liberating the master musician within. Can you explain your idea about his way?
Well, I don't know that I want to talk, to paraphrase what he would say, so I'm not going to, and I think it'd probably be best if you asked him, but I think there's a shared sense of, or sense of that what generally gets in the way of really, first of all, accessing your creative potential, but also getting all that information, scales, harmonies, all that into your implicit memory is oftentimes a narrative. And the narrative oftentimes is, I'm not good enough, I'm not learning fast enough, I should be doing this, I should be over here, oh, there's all this information, what should I choose? Overwhelm, negative story, internal critic, all that which just blocks access to a natural space of awareness and learning that inherently feels good and is in touch with creativity and contact. So I think part of his method is for musicians in any stage of development, and non-musicians for that matter, to be able to play and speak and act from that place of no story, but he calls it the space. That's the silence, that's the awareness, that's the peace.
Okay. Creativity, creation, to be creative. Where is this all coming from?
Well, I think I would say that same place. The medium through which it's translated is particular. The medium in this case is harmony, melody, rhythm. Maybe some styles if you want to. For other people it's visual, it's the canvas. For other people it's clay. For other people it doesn't even have to be art, right? It can be anything. Anything is inherently a creative. If you're in beginner's mind, everything is a creative activity. But so that's the medium. Those are the mediums, and there is a space. I think that you can, whether you call it awareness, whether you call it something else, that if you let that space, if you have access to that space, if you let that space move you, it's inherently creative. If you really think about it, what we're doing right now is creating. And there can be preconceptions of what is creative, what is not creative. But there's really, if you really investigate, getting up out of this chair and moving to the door is creative. If you do that and you see it as a creative act, then you're in creation. It's like, oh, cool. But no, of course, I've done this a million times, this is boring. It's not, that's a way of not paying attention to it.
Okay, well, you are a member of the Dafnis Pietro Sextet. And Dafnis Pietro just won a Grammy for his big band. And you recorded 2 albums with this drummer. Please explain your experience with him.
I love playing with Dafnis. We just went to Cuba, actually, had a great time there with the big band. We're playing in Newport this summer. We're playing in Brooklyn at the Celebrate Brooklyn outside. So Dafnis is an incredible drummer, master percussionist, sparkle, great to play with him. The energy is great, his compositions are great, it's just great energy on stage. I learn a lot because he's rhythmically, again, he's one person who has really investigated rhythm for himself, and it's a joy to be part of that, a joy to see that. And again, I have kinships with drummers. I like interacting with drummers, with crazy drummers. Oftentimes there's an element of craziness of Ari or Dafnis or other drummers that I play with, and I enjoy the challenge of that. And it's been a lot of fun traveling the journey with Dafnis.
Okay, what's the most beautiful sound you ever experienced? Is there something like that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We have to be careful, I think, with attaching labels to it, because if there's a most beautiful sound, then that means that there's other sounds that are less beautiful or not beautiful at all. So there's a classification which is maybe okay, but then I think that means, okay, where can I get that most beautiful sound back? And that is then an ego search of like, okay, what's the next experience that I can have? What's the best food I ever had? Oh, let me go back to that restaurant. What's the nicest person I've ever had a conversation with? But that goes down the rabbit hole of like, okay, you're making then this person, not really. And that's not really being present in the moment. So is it possible to listen to the sound and listen to it without the filter of I want this to be beautiful or I'm looking for something beautiful, but no, it's just a sound. When I teach listening to my students at ear training at the New School, I put on purposefully some music that is really, really grating or out there or really not easy to listen to. And I have them write down their judgments. Watch their thoughts, write down their judgments. This is too loud. He plays too fast. I don't like this, or whatever it is. And then I ask them to listen again and to see if they can put the judgments aside and just listen to it as sound, because that's all it is, as energy. And they do that, and suddenly they're able to get inside a little more. Maybe they don't love it, but at least they have a different relationship with it. So I'm careful with these experiences of what's the most beautiful thing that you ever experienced. Because again, that puts me in a box of reminiscing and wanting something back versus being present to what is.
Yeah. Well, who are you in private when there is no music and business around? Do you have a private life?
Sure, I have a family, I have a son, I have a wife, we do things together. I'm a dad, lots of different things. So hopefully hopefully I can express myself in lots of different ways.
Do you have some interesting hobbies maybe?
No, you know what, I'm too busy. I have a almost full-time, not quite, private psychotherapy practice. And so I need to read up on that. I need to keep myself updated on the latest treatments and things. I teach at the New School part-time, so I have classes there, I interact with students, I have gigs, I have family life, I have my son, I have to do homework with him. So hobby time, and I try to run every other day and go to the gym a little bit, and I try to meditate every day, so that sort of fills it up. There's not really a lot of time for anything else, actually.
Okay, thank you very much for this beautiful, inspirational talk with you.
Thank you
and for your time.
Cool.